Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from an anonymous requester. Anonymous? An anonymous requester. Special selection request song title is You Have Lived a Life That Speaks Volumes of the Human Race by the band The Critic. I don't know why I feel like I need that. You have lived a life that speaks volumes of the human. The title just feels like it calls for that. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one weird enough in that manner. I do the same thing with other bands that kind of have larger than life, sometimes even band titles like Godspeed You, Black Emperor. It's impossible to say that band with just like a normal inflection. Anyways, let's dive into this. The band is The Critic. I tried to find this anywhere else other than the YouTube link that was given to me. It's on a channel with one subscriber and not many views on this specific video. They're not on Spotify, they're not on Bandcamp, they're not on Apple Music. I couldn't find their lyrics, I think, on Genius either. They seem to be completely unknown other than this one little microcosm here on YouTube. So let's dive into this, see what's going on with You Have Lived a Life That Speaks Volumes of the Human Race by The Critic. Nice 4/4 here, created through reverb. Bit dreary. Interesting timing shifts. It feels like it drags and then rushes at times. It's very compressed too. Yeah, so it's still 4 bars of 4/4, but it's playing with emphasis on every third beat, which pushes against that understanding a little bit. It really isn't until that last bar when things line back up. Ooh, really interesting rhythmic shifts. Layered vocals, dual vocals, counterpoint. certainly going for a retardando there, but what we ended up getting is a little bit of it wasn't smooth. It was a bit shaky. We slowed down too much on the first bar, sped up a little bit for the second bar, and then found our ending tempo on our third bar. Love this progression. The moving dyads between our two guitars. I really like the bass presence on that final note, and I wish we could have heard more of that throughout. I don't know why it ended up being clearer there than anywhere else. I don't know why that is present. And it's going to bring up the other ones too. Alright, so something I talk about often is what a song is doing on paper, right? If we were to transpose this onto sheet music, what is written out there, what is being said, it's a way to subvert the performance of it and the production of it, or at least not necessarily to subvert them, but to explore the song outside of those two components. Not going on a side tangent with this one. We were going to go into classical music and some interesting elements of it, but I think I've talked about it on the channel before, anyways, and I want to stay on topic right now. So, but it's a way to explore the music outside of how this band performed it in this setting with this production. And I think I know it alters my perception of music from a more pure listening experience. I'm going to wager a lot of people hear this and think, wow, that wasn't so great. But I think what's on paper right here is phenomenal. As far as emo post hardcore music goes, I think that they found a really nice place of merging the more aggressive post-hardcore sounds with the more emotive and vulnerable sounds of emo in a way that isn't necessarily unique to them, but that they executed it on a really high level as far as the composition goes. the execution of that composition, the performance and the recording and the production are exceptionally rough. And if that's what you listen to, which I think is how most people listen to music, they're going to walk away from this exceptionally underwhelmed. But I hear a hit. This absolutely works for me. I just wish it had been given the extra time in the oven that it needed. Um, and well, okay, so the time that it needed. I want to clarify that real quick. I'm approaching this from the perspective that this is a demo, possibly of a band who doesn't have a lot of experience or possibly finances to sit in a studio for multiple days at a time and record everything as perfect as they want it to be. That there's going to be a lot of concessions in the way of this, in the way of achieving the goal that they want. It could very well be that this is exactly what they wanted, it's what they had in their minds, and they're 100% happy with this end result. I understand that's a possibility. That is not how I will be approaching this analysis, though. For better or worse, however you feel about that. Um, so I want to start with the music. What is here compositionally? Not how they performed it, not what sort of production's on it. What is actually on paper? We have a series of vocal elements that consistently sit within harmony and counterpoint, albeit they are all harshes. There are still perceived pitches to the different harsh types. There is variety in the harsh delivery from each of our vocalists. I think there's two vocalists. There might only be one doing double tracking, but the vocal timbre sound just different enough to me that I'm perceiving them as two different people, but they're consistent enough that we hear them layered. Layered harshes are something I absolutely love, and there's a counterpoint there often enough too, where they're saying two different things, not usually entirely, just usually in different rhythmic components. They might start on the same word, but one says the line faster than the other. Maybe the second vocalist holds out syllables instead of just going right through them. And in such, it feels like, I don't know if we have a proper word for this, because there's not really a melodic part to this. It's all textural, but they're going at different rhythmic paces in a way that it feels both like counterpoint and canon. They are playing the same thing, yet drastically different and quite displaced in time. It definitely features elements of a canon, but is at its heart counterpoint. Again, I don't know if we have a proper term for this in music, but it is a really neat way to go about crafting this. We've heard it in tracks before, but usually it is a layering of melody as well. And here it's purely texture, which paired with the shrillness of the harshes, these are very high, harsh tones mixed with, I'm going to say, a little bit of falsetto, of head voice. I don't know if that's completely accurate. The little bit I know about vocal work, that sounds dangerous. You never want to mix your false chord with your vocal cord work, but it sounds like a compressed falsetto, but like super false chord compressed. I don't know. It's extreme, and we have two of them in this extremity, which is fascinating. They literally sound like they're screaming or yelling. Um, but there's a vulnerability and desperation to both of the styles that I think is amplified when done together. It's just I love everything about how the vocals work together to support the overall feeling of this song. Underneath that, it is harder to hear due to the production, but there is a focus on harmony. There's a lot of chord progression going on through here, but it's not specifically aimed at playing chords. The one part that sticks out to me is our final guitar part, where both of our guitarists are playing single notes, switching off between repeated playing of a single note or just holding a single tone out. With the production, it's kind of hard to hear the difference, but there were moments when I heard multiple pickings on a single note, and parts where at least it was perceived to me to be just letting a note ring out. Um, and they're absolutely playing with dyads in a way that is not too dissimilar to the way that black metal does it. Um, but it also has an element of rhythmic change to it that black metal typically doesn't, in that both of our guitarists are not always consistently playing eighth notes, and it allows them to change notes at variable times, um, and allows notes to stay when another changes, and they can move with each other or against each other, or one can completely stagnate. The second half of the ending guitar riff, I remember correctly, the right guitar did a drone for like 4 bars, while the left guitar, I had that backwards. The right guitar did a drone for like 4 bars, while our left guitar had this nice melody line, and then they came back together, did a couple of notes simultaneously, moving rhythmically, but not moving parallel in notes and pitch, before branching off into their own directions again in their own melodies and rhythms. It's just really gorgeous, the dance that the guitars are doing in many of these sections, that is quite complex for single note dual melody counterpoint that is also semi-focused in supportive chord work. I really enjoyed it. The drums, I wish I could speak more about the drums because I'm not entirely sure what they're doing. Much like the bass, they're the part that gets muddied up the most by the production. I heard some more inventive melodic drumming, but it seemed to be a bit sparser against the general metronomic style drumming. However, there were some really nice accent points that allowed the song to have a rhythmic variability to it that the guitars didn't necessarily bring themselves all the time, but was present in the vocals. And it's really neat hearing the differentiation between the accented hits in the vocals, both of them, versus what the drum decided to accent. It created something that felt chaotic at times, but certainly cohesively complex. The bass, unfortunately, I barely heard any of at all, and I was actually surprised the tone was so clear and powerful in the very last 2 seconds of the song. Maybe it was because everything else was working on fading out, but I had such a tough time hearing the bass throughout the rest of the song. So I can't really speak too much about that, but given how complex everything else is in the band, I'd like to assume that they picked a bassist who'd be able to keep up with them, though it's just as likely that the bassist acts as a sort of foundation, a support, a centering of gravity for all the other complexity to sit upon. In fact, that's probably the direction I would take if I was given everything else and said, hey, write a bass line for this. It would probably be on the simpler side. But there's a lot of bands out there who say, we don't need foundation. We're going to go all in. Everybody's going to be complex. And they end up being quite listenable anyways. So it's not like it's a necessity. It just makes things a lot easier. And sometimes bands don't want to take the easy route. So I'm not going to assume what the bass is doing. I want to give it another listen eventually down the line, probably on my own time, just to kind of get another shot at hearing the bass. I also want to hear more of this band. I don't know how to find more. I think I'm just going to see if this channel has more of them, because there is gold beneath the grit. I don't think anyone says that, but I'm coining that phrase today. There's gold beneath the grit. Speaking of the grit, there's a lot of roughness to this that might be intentional, but I feel detracts from every bit of it. I mean, the elephant in the room is the production. It is muddied, it is compressed, it is lo-fi, it's just everything gets in the way. A lot of the instrumentation is in the same range. It really needs a separation of space and needs proper EQing to really allow everything to shine in order to showcase specifically what they're doing and to lean into the complexities of the harmony in a way that I feel is more tangible. I can feel where they're going for with the harmonies, and I can hear, oh, these are the emotions they're aiming for. But because it's stuffed under this level of fuzz and destruction, um, it's more of a vague awareness. I know what they're going for. I know what they want me to feel, and it just doesn't make me feel that way. There is this very strong, palpable sadness that I think the song resides within that, if produced properly, or I should say produced more clearly, let me put it that way, I think would be very easily felt, and this might even be quite the moving song, but as it stands, it's sort of buried under the grit. Such a weird phrase. How did I come up with that? But yeah, it's all just it's there, but it's there on the periphery, and I really want it to be the main component here, like it sounds like it's intended to be. And there's also the performance side as well. I don't think there's any intonation things going on, although it's really hard to tell given all the fuzz and stuff going on in the production. But there are plenty of timing issues going on here that some people may feel elevated, and once again, it may be exactly their intent, but to me, feels like there just wasn't enough time to practice, rehearse, and again, to record. They might have only had the money to do one or two takes for each instrument per track, and you take the best that you got and you try to work it all together in the end. But there's plenty of spaces where we rush, where we drag the ritardando coming off of the bridge into the second calming section. Just did not work at all. I mean, ritardando is a smooth diminishing of tempo, and this was jerky, and it also wasn't completely in the same direction. We overshot it a little bit, and so they tried to correct it, and the tempo comes back up a little bit, which feels really weird in this ritardando concept. It's just it was supposed to be this angular movement, diminishing of sound, diminishing of speed, and it felt super choppy instead. Took me out of the moment. But there's this side of indie rock too, where these components would be seen as a shining point amidst a sea of perfection, and that the inconsistencies and rawness of this performance is what makes it as good as it is. So, there's certainly, it's all subjective, it's art. Those are just, my perspective on the performance and production here, and I would really like to hear another version of this, whether this band puts out another one or maybe there's a cover of it. I'd love to hear it. I would, because I really think it's up my alley. I hear so much potential in here, and it just ends up not working. It trips over its own feet so often. I mentioned I couldn't find lyrics anywhere. There are some in the description. I haven't had a chance to look through them, but my lyrical analysis is usually fairly weak without some annotations or interviews to kind of guide me in a direction of what they were intending. But I'm going to give them a best shot, and we'll see what I have after I read through them. Interestingly, this song is about personal growth, but also possibly in a way societal growth. It speaks about watching the decline of both oneself and a society at large, possibly the lowering of the bar for yourself is to match where the bar is set societally. That is to say, if society says it's okay to be an unkept slob, well, why are you doing any better, especially if your neighbor's doing that as well? That's kind of the vibe I'm getting through here. Um, it says it hurts to see them fall, to watch them die. I can't explain, and they've set the bar far too low. It's now a goal that's not known by anyone. We've lost tact, and we've lost tact, and we've lost ourselves to each other. It's become a standard to let yourself go, to unmake all of your decisions made. We've lost so many chances, but the few have just begun. To prove ourselves, to make our mark, will be accepted as anyone should. It takes time to find the people that we once were, and we'll be accepted. It's our only hope. The idea that we need to build ourselves back up and raise the bar of what it is to be a person. Um, we will get there eventually. It's going to take time and effort, but who we are and who we should be is still tucked away within ourselves as a singular and as a whole. It's the only hope we have is to get back up to that point. Now, the whole concept here is rather vague. It could honestly relate to anything. I've heard for the last 20 years society's on a decline, and people have even pointed to years before my time that society has been on a decline. Is this what the lyrics are going on about? Is this old man shaking his fist at a cloud level of these days aren't like they used to be? It feels odd to pair that with post-hardcore, which tends to be a counterculture movement. But it's not out of the question for musical tastes and opinion and thought to sort of clash as far as traditional intent goes. But I don't know. That's certainly one way to read it. I don't know if that's how I would read it. I just see this as the societal part is what muddies it up a little bit. I think personal growth is an important aspect for anyone and everyone, and we should all always be attempting to become better than who we were yesterday, not worse off. I think the question then becomes, what does it mean to be better than yesterday? And that's where opinion and um, philosophy comes in. I think I'm going to give the lyrics a benefit of the doubt and assume that they are just looking at a generic idea of being better and not specifically looking at society as falling down a rabbit hole of degeneracy, which is still like 10%. I still see it on the periphery. I'm not a huge fan of that. But it's interesting then that the lyrics are about hope and about moving forward and about building back up. And musically, there is a feeling of sadness, sorrow, being broken down, uh, hopelessness. I think the vocals are the only thing that feel honest to the lyrics, in that there is a desperation to them that the lyrics sort of lean into, saying that we need to be better than we were. It's the only hope we have, as the final line states, and that not yeah sort of exasperation, but that that leaning towards running out of options, I think pairs well here. This is a weird track. I'm curious when it came out. The video was released on 2023, but this channel only has one video, and this is it. They they thought people needed to hear this, and they released it. And I'm a huge fan of that. I almost wonder if this is maybe a local band that never went anywhere and only had like an EP that they gave out at shows. Poorly recorded. They didn't have the finances to properly do it, and then they ran out of money. They had to let go of their dream, and they don't play anymore or something like this. And this person's like, I need to get this music out there. I feel the same way. I actually have a CD of a local band that you really can't find anywhere, and they made one album. We're working on their sophomore album, and just things weren't clicking. And I enjoy that album quite a bit, and this actually kind of gives me a little bit of that push to maybe see if I can't contact some of the people and release the album for them, even if it's just on YouTube. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the critics. You have lived a life that speaks volumes of the human race. What did you think of this one? Give me your thoughts, perspectives, opinions. Let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me, all that in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you to this menu right here. You can find ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, a link to my music, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps up today. I'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. As usual, we'll continue on with our theme of going on a journey. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.